Welcome to the newsroom on CNN Philippines. In the news, Joanna de Mafelis, the Filipino worker found dead in a freezer in Kuwait, is home in Iloilo. The government vows to give justice to her death. More Filipinos are arriving from Kuwait today as the government promises to protect workers from abuse in the Gulf state. And we take a look at how the last Filipino athlete at the Winter Games prepared for his Olympic debut tomorrow. Good evening, I'm Mike Rodriguez. Thanks for joining us. A homecoming full of sorrow. Joanna de Mafelis, the domestic helper found in a freezer in an abandoned apartment in Kuwait, is back home in Iloilo. Her body arrived in the province early this morning. Now her grieving community echoes her family's call for justice. Anjo Alimario reports from Sara, Iloilo.
A painful, emotional reunion. After 4 years of being away, Joanna de Mafelis is finally reunited with her family, but now it's only her lifeless body her parents and siblings get to touch. Eva de Mafelis wishes her daughter could hear those words. Joanna is back, but she's inside a sealed wooded casket, dead. Her remains arrived at the Iloilo International Airport around 5 in the morning. Joanna's relatives and friends also patiently waited for her to come home. But it was her youngest sister, Joyce, who seemed to be in so much pain. Joyce reveals she and Joanna were the closest in the family.
Makulit po siya, malambing, ng friendly, at saka wala kang masabi sa kanya kundi yung mga positive po.
Joanna had been sending money to rebuild their house wrecked by Typhoon Yolanda. But now that she's gone,
yung ipapangako ko sa iyo, ate, kung ano man yung pinangako natin sa isa't isa, tutuparin ko habang wala ka.
From the airport, her body was taken to a funeral home. She will then be brought to her hometown, Sara, for the wake and burial. On the way there, it was a moving sight, seeing Joanna's fellow Ilonggos out of their houses to pay tribute to her. Some carried posters extending their condolences, while others wrote justice for Joanna. You really get a sense of how her death has affected them. OWA Administrator Hans Kakdak says there's a plan for President Duterte to visit, but there's no official word yet from Malacanang. But Kakdak says the President is determined to attend the wake and assure the family that the government is here for them. Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines, Sara, Iloilo.
The Deputy Administrator of OWA, Arnel Ignacio, says Joanna came home a hero in her hometown. Ignacio is with Joanna's family in Iloilo.
Mistulang bayani ang dumating dito dahil yung kahabaan ng binaybay naming kalye, lahat ng mga taga rito ay lumabas. Ang haba ng kalye na yan, and it was really full of people showing their sympathy. Meron sila mga hawak-hawak na mga signs ng justice for Joanna. Merong balloons, ginahagisan nila ng bulaklak. Tapos yung kanilang mga kamag-anak from Manila, lahat yan dinala namin dito, all 32 of them. We brought them here para magkasama-sama yung kanilang pamilya.
The government vows to exert all efforts to bring justice to Joanna's death. OWA Administrator Arnel Ignacio says the government of Kuwait is ready to help Philippine authorities find the perpetrators. He adds what happened to the Mafelis should never happen again to other Filipinos abroad.
Ang dami niya talagang tama sa katawan. Considering na ang tagal na niya frozen doon sa Kuwait, masyado masakit yung nangyari. In fact, when I saw the body of Joanna, it is indescribable, too painful for me to describe. It should never happen again.
More workers from Kuwait arrive home today. Our Makoy Papioko is at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. Makoy, what's the story of these OFWs?
They were all happy and teary-eyed as they arrived home. These are repatriated overseas Filipino workers who availed of the Kuwaiti government's amnesty for overstaying migrant workers. There were a total of 150 repatriated OFWs who arrived today. Among them is Omera Ampuan, who's apparently frail and struggled to fill out government documents. Talking to her, she could not even remember her age. But what she can vividly recall is the abuse that she experienced from her former employer, who had repeatedly beaten her up. She escaped her employer in 2011, and for over 7 years, she juggled multiple babysitting jobs as an illegal migrant worker.
Kung amo, sinaktan niya ako, kaya nga umalis ako sa kanila. Tapos, hindi ako nakapagsumbong kasi madadama yung pamangkin ko. Pinilit ko na siya na umalis ako sa bahay niya. Sabi ko, ihatid mo ako sa bahay ng pamangkin ko. Kasi kung hindi mo ako ihatid doon, diyan ako natutulog sa karsada. Kasi sinabi ng madam ko, papatay niya ako. Naiya ko na mamatay dito sa Kuwait. Sabi ko ganun. Kasi wala naman akong ginagawa na masama eh. Pinagbintangan niya lang ako eh.
Omera's documents show she's 55 years old. She says she started working in Kuwait since 2000. She was able to go home in 2004 for a brief vacation for only 2 months, and since then she wasn't able to go back to the Philippines. She's among those who consider themselves lucky to go home as the Philippines pushes for better protection for Filipino workers in the Gulf state. Around 200 more repatriated overseas Filipino workers are expected tomorrow. Mike.
Makoy, who welcomed our kababayans there, and were they given assistance?
Yes, these OFWs were welcomed by officials from the Foreign Affairs Department and also from Overseas Workers and Welfare Association. They were given a total of 10,000 pesos each, and for those who will be flying to the Visayas and Mindanao, they will be temporarily staying at the housing units of OWA here in Pasay City while the authorities are arranging their free flights.
Makoy Popiojo there reporting to us live from the NAIA. The Philippine government puts forward a list of demands for Kuwait to better protect Filipino workers there. The Foreign Affairs Department says Kuwait needs to address complaints that workers are unpaid or underpaid or transferred to other employers and even other countries at whim. The government also wants Kuwait to extend its amnesty program for undocumented workers for 3 more months. The amnesty is set to expire by February 22nd. Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano says unless Kuwait can commit to reforms, President Duterte won't visit the Arab country for negotiations. The government is negotiating a memorandum of understanding with Kuwait, a deal that has been pending for 3 years. When the newsroom returns, China promises to no longer build in disputed areas in the South China Sea, and President Donald Trump visits Florida days after a deadly school shooting. Back after a quick break. Keep it here on CNN Philippines. Facebook Live, thank you po for joining us tonight. Thank you also for all your messages. I've been reading your messages of support for the family of Joanna de Mafelis. As you've heard from our correspondent, Anjo Alimario, nandun po siya sa Sara, Iloilo, yung hometown ni Joanna, at doon nga nagdadalamhati ang buong community ni Joanna and echoing the call for justice ng kanyang pamilya. No? Si Jing Dave is watching from Dubai. Joanne Ginolos is watching from Kuwait. Eloisa Larson from Sweden, she says, R.I.P. Joanna. Sarah Jean Pudao Phillips says, justice for Joanna and condolences to the family. Thank you all for your messages. I hope you stay tuned until the end of the show. This is the newsroom on CNN Philippines. Welcome back. Troops from the Philippine Marines are being deployed to northern Luzon to help pursue communist rebels and secure territorial borders. It is their first deployment in the region in close to 3 decades. Our senior correspondent, David Santos, tells us more.
They've gained notoriety as warriors of Mindanao, having fought for years rebels and the most vicious terror groups in the south. Now they find themselves in unfamiliar territory, northern Luzon, specifically Cagayan Province.
First time namin makakita ng Marines. First time ko rin makarinig ng humihiyaw ng mga Marines.
The Marine deployment comes as no surprise. The region's most recent military commanders are former Marine Corps commandants. The Marines' primary mission, augment the Philippine Army-dominated Joint Task Force addressing the region's protracted war against communist rebels. Like in pocket areas in Mindanao and the Visayas, insurgency remains to be a perennial security problem in the north.
Any disruption of our activity in Northern Luzon will mean also a significant impact to the seat of the government in Manila.
The Northern Luzon Command, or NOLCOM, also oversees territorial defense in the region. Aside from guarding the Panatag or Scarborough Shoal off Zambales, it is tasked to have the Navy carry President Duterte's orders to protect Benham or Philippine rice from foreign explorations.
We will follow the basic rules of engagement. Meron tayong mga protocols and diplomatic actions that we have set, guidance from the national government, how to deal with those cases and incidents.
There are also plans to deploy the Marines on Mavulis Island, the northernmost of the Batanes Islands, which lies on the Philippines border with Taiwan. NOLCOM Chief Emmanuel Salamat is confident the Marines will easily immerse into the communities given its vast so-called winning the heart strategy in Mindanao. In Baguio City, David Santos, CNN Philippines.
The Philippines is aggressively pushing for joint oil and gas explorations with China in disputed waters in the South China Sea. The government, however, gives the assurance it will draft a legal framework that respects the Constitution. Claire Yao has the full story.
The Philippines and China may have competing claims in the South China Sea, but they've agreed to push forward exploring disputed waters together. Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano says both countries came to an agreement during their bilateral meeting Tuesday. The study will focus on possible oil and gas deposits underwater. Cayetano says the joint exploration will not violate the country's sovereignty. Back in 2005, China, Vietnam, and the Philippines also conducted a joint seismic study in the South China Sea, although that undertaking is being opposed in a pending petition before the Supreme Court.
Right now, we have not discussed, and we're not discussing development. We're discussing exploration muna. Because what's the use of the debate whether or not allowed sa Constitution ang joint development kung hindi natin alam ano ang nandyan na pwedeng i-harvest without damaging the environment.
The Foreign Affairs, Energy, and Defense Departments will now draft a legal framework to ensure the joint exploration follows foreign ownership restrictions in the Constitution. Cayetano says the framework should be finalized before June, paving the way for critical projects like the Reed Bank. Natural gas reserves there could supplement the Malampaya supply, which runs out by 2027.
But I did promise the Secretary of Energy na bibilisan namin. Kasi of course, the Secretary of Energy, ang kanyang is yung energy security natin. And given the fact na Malampaya has its limitation, we're really looking for new wells.
The Philippines also raised the issue of militarization during its meeting with China. New photos show runways, hangars, and communication towers on the artificial islands. Cayetano says China built the structures, saying other countries are also setting up their military presence in disputed waters.
Tingin natin, bakit kayo may runway dyan? Kahit naman magkasundo tayo, kung yung ibang countries naglalagay din ng runway, kung yung US, Great Britain nagpapadala din ng Navy, it cannot be resolved by us lang.
As for Benham rice, Cayetano says China is only following scientific procedures in naming undersea features it discovered. The Philippines will push through with plans to submit names of their own. The Foreign Affairs Secretary turns tables on critics, saying Benham rice was first named by Americans anyway.
So did we file a diplomatic protest sa America? Or did we have to wait for President Duterte to call it Philippine rice?
Claire Yao, CNN Philippines.
The Foreign Affairs Department says China promises to no longer build in disputed areas in the South China Sea. In a no-holds-barred meeting with China this week, Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano says China committed to stop its activities on uninhabited features. Reports show China has finished turning 7 reefs into air and naval-based structures. Cayetano, however, says Chinese officials found it unfair that they're being singled out in the militarization issue because other claimant countries are also building in contested areas. Other claimant countries in the Spratlys are Vietnam, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Brunei. One of America's nuclear-powered aircraft carriers is in Manila Bay. The visit comes amid a statement by the U.S. Pacific Command Chief. China has built 7 new military bases in the South China Sea. Our Rex Remitio tells us more.
USS Carl Vinson, one of the biggest warships of the United States, visits the Philippines. Officials show how sophisticated the aircraft carrier is and ready for war. The ship, which they say is a living city, houses 5,000 sailors. Its flight deck has a size of 2 soccer fields. The 35-year-old ship has been used to bomb ISIS targets in the Middle East. Right at the hangar bay, they showed the live bombs of their FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jets.
We've conducted a lot of missions throughout our history, and we will continue to do so.
This nuclear-powered aircraft carrier has strike fighters, airborne early warning aircraft, logistical support aircraft, and helicopters, which officials say ensure air superiority. The deployment of USS Carl Vinson comes less than a week after a squadron of advanced Chinese Su-35 fighter jets, dubbed the Killer in the Sky, flew over the South China Sea. U.S. Pacific Command Chief Harry Harris recently spoke at a congressional hearing, saying China has built 7 new military bases in the South China Sea. Beijing have been seeking to reclaim most of the islands in the hotly contested waters, while the U.S. wants to maintain its presence as a global power. USS Carl Vinson spokesperson Tim Hawkins, however, says their presence is only part of their routine operations. But they also stress the importance of the U.S. working with regional allies like the Philippines and promoting what they call regional stability and security.
All should operate in accordance with international law, rules, standards, and norms in order to keep the seas free and commerce moving freely.
USS Carl Vinson is staying in Manila until Tuesday. It will then go to Vietnam, the first time for a U.S. warship to visit the country. Vietnam is also engaged in a dispute with China over territorial claims in the South China Sea. Rex Remitio, CNN, Philippines.